Hey guys, Atticus here. This is like my fourth attempt at this video. I'm having a hard time conveying my thoughts. But if at first you don't succeed. So, gender in Korea. It's really interesting because I have come to terms with my gender identity and my masculine identity while living in Asia. So I assume that my process may be a little bit different moving home and in like a week and a half. It may be a little bit of a different process, and so I wanted to kind of document some of the gender observations that I've made. So my female and my male students all attend schools that are only male and only female. There's no co-ed school in the county that I live in. I think there are some co-eds in Seoul, but not where I am. And the uniforms are very like traditional, and the girls have short skirts, much too short, actually, if you ask for my opinion. They are much too short skirts, and the young men wear ties and a vest and a jacket, and very traditional, appropriate wear, I guess. And they act different, like noticeably different. The boys are kind of riled up and eager to answer, and sometimes have like a little bit of an attitude, and the girls are shy and kind of mortified if you call on them. And that dynamic is similar in the U.S., at least in my experience, it's similar. But normally in the U.S. you might have one or two or three girls who, in a class, who will be boisterous and articulate. But that's kind of a rare experience for me, at least, in the private sector. But despite the very confining gender roles, I do find that my students are, the male students and the female students, there's so much, what's the word? Ambiguity? There's a lot of ambiguity and androgynousness. Androgyny. And if it wasn't for the way that they carried themselves and their behaviors, sometimes it might be hard to discern what one student's gender and sex is. Obviously, gender is different from sex, but for the purpose, we'll kind of use them interchangeably for this discussion. So yeah, only in Asia could you have a story like Mulan, right, where a girl dresses up like a boy and pretends to be a boy and goes out and saves the country, And that's actually a very common theme in folklore, in Asian folklore, at least in Korean folklore. I've heard that theme before, and I heard it in China. I'm not too familiar with Japanese folklore, but I would venture to guess that may be a theme as well, explored in literature and just history, right? So it is really interesting that these stories kind of promote independence and assertion of masculine presentation, but in actuality that is the farthest from the truth. And I still get students who ask me why I cut my hair, and I cut my hair like 8 months ago, and they still are like, "Teacher, why'd you cut your hair?" And I just say, I was hot, or I don't have to go into detail. I don't like to have to do my hair in the morning, whatever. And I'm actually having like a terrible hair day. It's been bothering me all day. I need a haircut, but I'm trying not to cut my hair because I'm going in for job interviews and I present in such a masculine way anyway that I kind of feel like I need to femme it up just a little bit, at least. Not that this haircut is very feminine, but I'm feeling a little compelled to present a little more femininely. Feminine. I live in an anonymity. Okay, so Margaret Cho said it best. She was talking about her mother, and her mom said, "There are gay people all over this world, except Korea." And wow, that just pretty much sums up the sentiment right there for any sort of gender variance or deviance. And I notice that, like, if my female students get a shorter haircut, like not necessarily my short, but just shorter, like to their jaw or something, the other students will kind of tease them and be like, "Oh, you look like a boy." And if they're not farther along in puberty, maybe they might kind of look like a male classmate, but there's like a really strict, confining way of dealing with this, and it's a lot of times I find in the classroom, I don't want to say like humiliation but there's a very active role of putting someone in their place here, and it's interesting, but that's a different topic. So yeah, if I ask my students what their parents do for a living, we're talking about careers and different jobs. If I ever, a lot of times this happens with my younger students, like my 4th and 5th graders, but if one of their mothers work, it's kind of said with shame, oh, my mother works in a business, I'm like, oh, that's great, my mother works too, and just try to normalize it, but it's said with shame. And it's actually the first time in Korea that women have had the opportunity to not marry out of economic restrictions, that they have the opportunity to make a living, and although the living is substantially lower than their male counterparts, it is a really exciting time in any country's history that assertion of independence is being made. And I see it a lot in the school system. Young teachers, or not necessarily young teachers, but teachers who are able to pay rent and afford a cost of living without having to get married, and it's really empowering, I think. But like I was saying, I kind of started to come to terms with my masculine identity in Asia, and one thing that I know that is not an issue here that may present as an issue in the U.S. is my height. So I'm a little guy. I'm 5 foot, and that's on a good day, like I'm just a little bit under 5 foot, actually, if we're gonna be honest here. And in Asia, that is not a big deal. Every day I come in contact with people who are short. Like I'm not the only one, and grown men with briefcases and their little newsy caps, and maybe they're biking down the road, or maybe they're walking to the bus stop, but every day I come into contact with someone who is my height or shorter. That is not the case in the U.S. In the U.S., I'm going to be perceived as a short guy, and or a short androgynous thing, which I'm not too fond about that idea, but whatever. Yeah, it's it's kind of like the Matrix, right? There's this term that I really love, the residual self-image. My residual self-image does not include being short and frumpy, but sometimes, like, if I'm a little bit more honest with myself, that's my presentation, and it's just a blow to the ego, because I'm not a short guy. I'm just not a short guy, but I am, So, in Asia, that isn't something that I have to come to terms with, It's not an issue here. But I imagine that there will be I will get a bit of a short man's complex, and I don't know what I'll do to compensate for that. Probably buy a big expensive car that drives much too fast for anyone's safety, but, there you go. You have to compensate somehow. And I don't know what I'm saying here, but anyway, it's just interesting to think about, and I'm sure that once I get into stateside and I'm progress in my medical transition, that maybe I'll have some more articulate observations. But as it is, yeah, okay, guys, I love you. Bye.